Sarah Chen watched her mother's confident expression crumble as the loan officer delivered the devastating news. Patricia Martinez-Chen sat rigidly in the leather chair, her manicured fingers gripping her designer purse so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The woman who had spent decades mocking her daughter's foolish digital fantasies was now facing foreclosure on the family home, and her only hope sat across from her in a modest sweater and jeans. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'm sorry, Mrs. Martinez-Chen, but given your current financial situation and credit history, we cannot approve this loan modification, the banker said with practiced sympathy. However, if you had a co-signer with substantial assets or income, we might be able to reconsider. Patricia's gaze slowly turned towards Sarah, and for the first time in 32 years, her mother looked at her not with disappointment or condescension, but with desperate need. The irony was so thick, Sarah could taste it. The daughter whose career had been dismissed as playing on computers was now the only person who could save the family legacy. Sarah's story began 28 years earlier in the sprawling suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona, where the Chen family lived in a pristine house that her mother treated more like a museum than a home. Patricia Martinez-Chen had married David Chen, a successful orthodontist, and had built her entire identity around being the perfect doctor's wife. Every room was meticulously decorated, every surface gleamed, and every family gathering was an opportunity to showcase their success to friends and neighbors. From the earliest age, Sarah understood that her mother had very specific expectations for what constituted a respectable life. Patricia would spend hours at the country club with the other medical wives, discussing their children's achievements with barely concealed competition. Dr. Morrison's daughter was studying pre-med at Stanford. The orthopedic surgeon's son was already accepted to law school. Patricia needed her own trophy to display, and she had decided that trophy would be Sarah. The pressure began in elementary school when Patricia enrolled Sarah in every activity that might look impressive on future college applications. Piano lessons on Mondays, French tutoring on Tuesdays, advanced mathematics on Wednesdays, violin on Thursdays, and debate club on Fridays. Weekends were reserved for additional academic enrichment camps or volunteer work at the hospital where her father practiced. Sarah's younger brother Michael was given far more freedom to explore his interests. While she was shuttled from activity to activity, Michael was allowed to play video games, join the soccer team for fun rather than achievement, and generally enjoy a normal childhood. Patricia's explanation was always the same. Boys had more options in life, so they didn't need to work as hard to establish themselves. The first real clash came when Sarah was 14 and discovered graphic design software on the family computer. She'd been working on a school project about environmental conservation when she became fascinated by the visual elements of her presentation. Instead of simply inserting clip art like her classmates, Sarah spent hours learning to create original graphics, experimenting with colors and layouts until she had produced something that looked almost professional. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, was so impressed that she asked Sarah to design posters for the upcoming school fundraiser. Sarah threw herself into the project, creating a series of eye-catching designs that helped the fundraiser exceed its goals by 30%. She felt a rush of satisfaction unlike anything she had experienced in piano recitals or debate competitions. This felt natural, creative, meaningful. When Sarah excitedly showed the posters to her mother, Patricia barely glanced at them before returning to her medical journal. "That's nice, dear, but you shouldn't spend so much time on these little art projects. You need to focus on your real studies. Art is a hobby, not a career." Sarah tried to explain that graphic design was a legitimate profession, that companies paid good money for marketing materials and branding, but Patricia cut her off with a dismissive wave. "Sarah, I've seen enough artists waiting tables to know that creative fields don't provide security. You're too smart to waste your talents on something so frivolous." Despite her mother's disapproval, Sarah continued to explore design in her spare time. She taught herself Photoshop and Illustrator through online tutorials, staying up late after completing her required homework to experiment with different techniques. She created logos for imaginary companies, designed album covers for bands that didn't exist, and rebuilt websites for local businesses just for practice. Her skills improved rapidly, and by her junior year of high school, Sarah was good enough to start taking on small freelance projects. She designed business cards for her father's colleague, created a logo for her neighbor's catering business, and even developed a basic website for a local bookstore. The money she earned was modest, but the sense of accomplishment was enormous. Patricia was less than pleased when she discovered that Sarah was earning money from her hobby. The confrontation took place in their pristine kitchen, where Patricia stood with her arms crossed, while Sarah tried to explain that she had earned $300 in the past month. $300, Patricia repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. Sarah, your father makes that much in an hour. Do you understand how embarrassing it is when people ask what my daughter wants to do with her life and I have to tell them she wants to play with computers? Mrs. Henderson's daughter is going to be a surgeon. Dr. Kim's daughter is studying international law. What am I supposed to say? That my daughter makes pretty pictures? The words stung, but Sarah had expected them. She had prepared her argument carefully, printing out articles about the growing digital marketing industry, statistics about graphic designer salaries, and examples of successful design agencies. Patricia didn't even look at the materials. I don't care what these articles say, her mother continued. Art is not a stable career. You're going to study something practical in college, business, medicine, law, engineering, something that will give you security and respect. Sarah's father, David, had remained largely silent during these discussions, occasionally offering mild support for his daughter's interests, but never directly challenging his wife's authority. He was a gentleman who preferred to avoid conflict, and Patricia had always been the decision-maker in matters concerning the children's futures. The tension escalated during Sarah's senior year when it came time to apply for colleges. Patricia had already selected several prestigious universities with strong business programs, assuming that Sarah would comply with her wishes. When Sarah submitted applications to art schools and design programs without her mother's knowledge, the discovery led to the biggest fight of her teenage years. "You did what?" Patricia's voice rose to a pitch that made the windows seem to vibrate. "You applied to art school behind my back? After everything we've discussed about your future?" Sarah stood her ground, though her hands were shaking. "I applied to business schools too, but I also want to pursue what I'm passionate about. The Rhode Island School of Design has an excellent program, and graduates get hired by major companies like Apple and Nike. Companies that will replace you the moment the economy turns bad," Patricia shot back. "Art is the first thing people cut from their budgets during tough times. You need a career that people will always need, not something that depends on trends and taste." The argument continued for hours, with David attempting unsuccessfully to mediate. Patricia threatened to refuse to pay for college if Sarah didn't choose an acceptable program. Sarah, desperate to pursue her passion, announced that she would take out student loans if necessary. "Fine," Patricia said, her voice turning ice cold. "If you want to ruin your life with this fantasy, you can do it without our help, but don't come crying to us when you realize that the real world doesn't care about your artistic dreams." Sarah did exactly what she had threatened to do. She was accepted to several programs, but chose the Visual Communications Design program at Arizona State University, partially because it was close enough to home that she could maintain some connection to her family, and partially because the in-state tuition made her student loans more manageable. Her mother's reaction to the acceptance letter was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive disappointment. "Arizona State," she said, reading the letter with the expression someone might wear while examining a dead fish. "Well, I suppose it's better than nothing, though I still don't understand why you're wasting your intelligence on this." The next 4 years were a blur of financial stress and academic intensity. Sarah worked 20 hours a week at a local coffee shop to help cover her living expenses, while maintaining a full course load and building a portfolio that would help her find employment after graduation. She rarely came home for visits, partly because of her busy schedule, and partly because every conversation with her mother eventually turned into a discussion of how much better Sarah's life could have been if she had chosen a more practical field. During her junior year, Sarah landed an internship with a mid-sized advertising agency in Phoenix.
The work was challenging and fast-paced, and she discovered that she had a natural talent for understanding client needs and translating them into visual solutions. Her supervisor, a woman named Linda Torres, who had built her own successful design career over 2 decades, became an unofficial mentor. "You have real instincts for this," Linda told Sarah after she successfully completed a challenging project for a major restaurant chain. "Not everyone can balance creativity with commercial viability the way you do. Have you thought about what you want to do after graduation?" Sarah admitted that she was nervous about job prospects, particularly given her mother's constant predictions of failure. Linda laughed and showed her the agency's job board, which was filled with openings for qualified designers. "Your mother doesn't understand the industry," Linda said gently. "Good designers are always in demand. Companies need marketing materials, websites, product packaging, corporate branding. The digital revolution has created more opportunities, not fewer." Sarah's confidence grew throughout her senior year as she built an impressive portfolio and made connections within the industry. She graduated with a 3.8 GPA and multiple job offers, ultimately accepting a position with a technology startup that was developing mobile apps for small businesses. The salary was $38,000 per year, which wasn't enormous, but was enough for Sarah to rent a small apartment and begin paying down her student loans. More importantly, she loved the work. Each day brought new challenges and creative problems to solve, and she felt like she was using her talents in a way that made a real difference for the company's clients. Patricia's reaction to news of Sarah's employment was predictably lukewarm. "$38,000, she repeated when Sarah called to share her good news. "That's less than what I spend on groceries in a year. I hope you're happy with your choice." Sarah was determined to prove her mother wrong, and she threw herself into her career with the same intensity she had brought to her studies. She volunteered for extra projects, stayed late to perfect her designs, and constantly sought feedback from her supervisors about how to improve her skills. Within 18 months, she had been promoted to senior designer with a salary increase to $45,000. The startup's success created new opportunities for Sarah to expand her skill set. She learned web development basics, studied user experience design, and even took on some project management responsibilities. By her third year with the company, she was leading a team of 4 designers and earning $62,000 annually. Patricia's comments about Sarah's career became less frequent, but no less pointed. During family gatherings, she would introduce Sarah to friends as "my daughter who works with computers," always with a slight emphasis on computers that made it sound vaguely embarrassing. When other parents bragged about their children's achievements, Patricia would change the subject or find an excuse to leave the conversation. The turning point came when Sarah was 26 and decided to leave the startup to launch her own design consultancy. She had built a strong network of contacts, saved enough money to live modestly for 6 months while building her client base, and felt confident that she could provide better service to small businesses than the large agencies that often treated smaller clients as afterthoughts. Patricia's reaction to this news was swift and brutal. "You're giving up a stable job to start a business in an industry you've never proven you can handle independently? Sarah, this is exactly the kind of impractical thinking that I've been trying to protect you from your entire life." Sarah tried to explain her business plan, the clients she had already secured, and her projections for growth, but Patricia wasn't interested in details. 90% of new businesses fail within the first year, she announced, though she suspected she was making up the statistic. "You're throwing away years of building a reputation for a fantasy." Despite her mother's skepticism, Sarah's consultancy began to flourish almost immediately. Her reputation for delivering high-quality work on tight deadlines had preceded her, and several former clients from the startup followed her to her new venture. Within 6 months, she was earning more than she had at her previous job, and her client list was expanding rapidly. The success continued to build over the next 3 years. Sarah hired her first employee, then a second, then moved into a small office space in downtown Phoenix. Her client roster grew to include regional nonprofits, tech companies, and even a few national brands that had found her through word-of-mouth recommendations. By the time she turned 29, Sarah's company was generating over $400,000 in annual revenue, and her personal income had reached 6 figures. She had paid off her student loans, purchased a modest house in an up-and-coming neighborhood, and even started contributing to a retirement account. The irony was not lost on her that she was now more financially successful than many of her childhood friends who had pursued the practical careers her mother had championed. Her college roommate, who had gone to law school, was still working 60-hour weeks as a junior associate for less money than Sarah earned working from her home office 3 days a week. Another friend who had studied accounting was laid off during an economic downturn and struggled to find equivalent employment. Yet Patricia never acknowledged Sarah's success directly. When relatives asked about Sarah's work, Patricia would say things like, "She has a little business doing computer graphics," or "She's doing well with her artistic projects." The dismissive language made it clear that Patricia still viewed her daughter's career as somehow less legitimate than traditional professions. Sarah had largely stopped expecting recognition or pride from her mother, focusing instead on building her business and maintaining relationships with clients who valued her expertise. She had a small but close group of friends, a comfortable lifestyle, and the satisfaction of knowing that she had succeeded in spite of the obstacles her family had placed in her path. This comfortable existence was disrupted one Thursday morning when Sarah received an unexpected phone call from Michael, now 30, and working as a middle school teacher in Tucson. Her brother sounded uncharacteristically stressed as he asked if they could meet for lunch that weekend. "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked, noting the tension in his voice. "It's about Mom and Dad," Michael said carefully. "There are some things going on that you should probably know about." They met at a small restaurant halfway between Phoenix and Tucson, and Michael's news was more serious than Sarah had expected. Their father's orthodontic practice was struggling financially, partly due to increased competition from newer practices, and partly due to his reluctance to embrace modern technology and marketing techniques. "Dad's always been old school," Michael explained, picking at a sandwich. "He still uses paper records for everything, his website looks like it was built in 1995, and he refuses to accept that patients expect a different experience now. His patient base has been shrinking for 3 years." Sarah was surprised but not entirely shocked. Her father had always been resistant to change, preferring familiar routines and established methods. In a rapidly evolving field like dentistry, that conservatism could be a liability. "How bad is it?" she asked. Michael's expression grew more somber. "Bad enough that they're behind on the mortgage payments. Mom's been hiding it from everyone, but I found out when she asked me to loan them money. I'm a teacher, Sarah. I don't have the kind of money they need." The revelation was startling. Sarah had always assumed her parents were financially secure, if not wealthy. Her father's practice had supported their comfortable lifestyle for decades, and Patricia had never worked outside the home except for volunteer activities that enhanced her social standing. "They haven't said anything to me," Sarah said, though this wasn't entirely surprising given the strained nature of her relationship with her mother. "Mom's embarrassed," Michael explained. "You know how important image is to her. The idea of people finding out that they're struggling financially would be devastating. But Sarah, I think they might lose the house." Sarah felt a complicated mix of emotions. Despite years of criticism and dismissal from her mother, the thought of her parents facing financial ruin was genuinely distressing. At the same time, she couldn't help but notice the irony that her impractical career had left her in a better financial position than her father's traditionally respectable profession. "What do they need?" she asked, already knowing that Michael was leading up to a request for her help. "Mom mentioned that they need about $60,000 to catch up on back payments and restructure their debt. Dad's too proud to ask for help, and Mom's too embarrassed. I don't think they even realize that your business has been so successful." Sarah considered this information carefully. $60,000 was a substantial amount, but it was within her means. Her business had been profitable for several consecutive years, and she had been conservative about her personal expenses. The question wasn't whether she could afford to help her parents, but whether she was willing to do so given the history of their relationship. "I need to think about this," she told Michael. "It's not about the money, but there are some complicated family dynamics involved." Michael nodded understandingly. "I know Mom hasn't always been supportive of your career choices, but whatever happened between you two, they're still our parents."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sarah made her decision. She would help her parents, but she would do so on her own terms. She called Patricia directly, something she hadn't done in months. "Sarah?" Her mother sounded surprised to hear from her. "Is everything all right?"
Michael told me about the financial situation, Sarah said without preamble. I understand you're having trouble with the mortgage payments. The silence that followed was so long that Sarah wondered if the call had been disconnected. When Patricia finally spoke, her voice was tight with what Sarah recognized as humiliation. Michael had no right to discuss our private business with you, she said. Maybe not, Sarah replied, but I'm glad he did. I want to help. Another long pause. Sarah, we appreciate the gesture, but this isn't something that can be solved with a small loan. I'm not talking about a small loan, Sarah said. I'm talking about $60,000 to catch up your back payments and restructure your debt. This time, the silence was different, filled with shock rather than embarrassment. Sarah, that's an enormous amount of money. You couldn't possibly. I can, Sarah interrupted. My business has been very successful, more successful than you've ever given me credit for. Patricia's response revealed the depth of her misconception about her daughter's finances. Honey, I know you've been doing well with your little company, but $60,000 is serious money. Maybe if you could help us find a bank that would work with us, or if you knew someone in finance who could give us advice. Sarah realized that her mother genuinely had no idea about the scale of her success. Patricia still thought of her daughter's business as a modest, freelance operation, probably earning enough to cover rent and groceries, but nothing more substantial. Mom, Sarah said gently, my company generated over $500,000 in revenue last year. I own my house outright, I have substantial savings, and I can afford to help you without any financial hardship. The confession was met with stunned silence. Sarah could almost hear Patricia's worldview reshaping itself around this new information. $500,000? Patricia repeated faintly. Yes. The industry you dismissed as unstable and impractical has allowed me to build a successful business with clients across the country. I have employees, an office, and a reputation in my field that brings in new business consistently. Patricia seemed to struggle with how to respond to this revelation. But you never said, you never asked. Every conversation we've had about my career has involved you telling me what I should have done differently or how much better my life would be if I had listened to your advice. You've never expressed interest in what I've actually accomplished. The conversation that followed was unlike any Sarah had ever had with her mother. Patricia seemed genuinely shocked to learn about her daughter's success, and for the first time in Sarah's memory, she asked detailed questions about the business, the clients, and the work itself. Sarah found herself describing projects she had completed, challenges she had overcome, and goals she was working toward. Patricia listened without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification, but never offering criticism or unsolicited advice. I had no idea, Patricia said finally. Sarah, I'm proud of what you've built. I may not understand the technical aspects, but I can certainly understand success. The admission was more than Sarah had ever expected to hear from her mother, and it came with a complex mix of vindication and sadness. She was grateful for the recognition, but couldn't help wondering how their relationship might have been different if Patricia had shown this openness and curiosity years earlier. They arranged to meet at the bank the following week to discuss the loan modification. Patricia had been reluctant to involve Sarah in the meeting, worried about how it would look to have her daughter present during such a humiliating financial discussion. Sarah insisted that her presence was necessary if she was going to guarantee the loan. The bank meeting was everything Sarah had imagined and more.
Patricia arrived dressed impeccably, her armor of respectability intact despite the circumstances. She had clearly prepared for the meeting as if it were a social event, with her hair perfectly styled and her best jewelry prominently displayed. The loan officer, a woman in her 40s named Jennifer Walsh, reviewed the Chen family's financial situation with professional sympathy. David's practice income had declined substantially over the past 3 years, while their expenses had remained high. They had already borrowed against the house twice, and their current debt-to-income ratio made them ineligible for traditional refinancing options.
However, Jennifer continued, if you have a cosigner with substantial income and assets, we might be able to restructure this as a family loan with more favorable terms. This was the moment Sarah had been anticipating. She presented her financial statements, tax returns, and business documentation to Jennifer, who reviewed them with evident surprise. Miss Chen, these are very impressive financials for someone your age, Jennifer said. Your business appears to be extremely stable and profitable. With your guarantee, we can certainly work with your parents on a modified payment plan. Sarah watched her mother's face during this exchange, seeing Patricia process the reality that her daughter was not only financially successful, but was in a position to solve a problem that had seemed insurmountable. The role reversal was complete. The daughter whose career had been dismissed as frivolous was now rescuing the parents who had built their identity around traditional markers of success. The loan modification was approved, with Sarah serving as the primary guarantor. The new payment structure was manageable given David's current income, and the family would be able to keep their house. Patricia remained largely quiet during the paperwork process, signing documents with a subdued demeanor that was unlike her usual commanding presence. As they left the bank, Patricia finally spoke directly to Sarah about what had just occurred. I don't know how to thank you, she said, her voice lacking its usual confident tone. You saved our home. Sarah stopped walking and turned to face her mother. I didn't do this for thanks, she said. I did it because you're my mother, and I love you, despite our differences. But I do want you to understand something. Patricia waited, her expression expectant. The career you spent years dismissing as impractical and unstable is the reason I'm able to help you now, Sarah continued. The skills you thought were worthless have built a business that employs people and serves clients across the country. The industry you didn't respect has given me financial security and professional satisfaction. Patricia's response was not the defensive argument Sarah had expected. Instead, her mother's shoulders sagged slightly and she nodded slowly. You're right, Patricia said. I was wrong about your career, and I was wrong about your potential. I let my own fears about financial security blind me to what you were actually achieving. The admission was more than Sarah had dared to hope for, but Patricia wasn't finished. I spent so many years focused on what I thought success should look like that I missed recognizing the success you had actually created, her mother continued. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm sorry I didn't support your dreams, and I'm sorry I didn't celebrate your achievements. The apology was simple but profound, representing a fundamental shift in their relationship. Sarah felt years of resentment and hurt beginning to ease, replaced with something that might eventually grow into mutual respect. Over the following months, Patricia made genuine efforts to understand Sarah's business and show interest in her work. She asked questions about clients and projects, shared Sarah's achievements with friends, and even referred a few potential clients to her daughter's company. The relationship between Sarah and her parents gradually transformed. David, relieved of the financial pressure that had been weighing on him, began to embrace some of the technological improvements that Sarah suggested for his practice. Patricia started volunteering with a nonprofit organization that helped small business owners develop marketing materials, often recommending Sarah's company for projects that were beyond the volunteer scope. Most significantly, Patricia began telling people that her daughter owned a successful design consultancy, dropping the dismissive qualifiers that had previously accompanied any mention of Sarah's career. When friends asked for business advice, Patricia would proudly suggest they consult with Sarah, describing her as an expert in her field. The family dynamics had shifted permanently. Sarah was no longer the daughter with the questionable career choices, but the successful businesswoman who had saved the family home. Patricia was no longer the authority figure dispensing wisdom about practical life decisions, but a mother who had learned to respect her daughter's judgment and expertise. 1 year after the bank meeting, Sarah received an unexpected call from Patricia. Her mother had been contacted by a friend whose daughter was considering a career in graphic design, but was receiving resistance from her own parents. I told her that you would be the perfect person to talk to this girl. You could explain what the industry is really like and what it takes to be successful. Sarah agreed to meet with the young woman, a college junior named Maria, who was facing the same kind of family pressure that Sarah had experienced years earlier. Maria's parents, like Patricia, viewed creative careers as impractical and risky compared to traditional professional paths. During their conversation, Sarah found herself sharing not just information about the design industry, but also her own story of family skepticism and eventual vindication. She explained the challenges of building a creative career, but also the rewards of working in a field that combined artistic expression with commercial problem solving. The most important thing, Sarah told Maria, is to build your skills to a professional level and understand that creativity alone isn't enough. You need to learn about business, client relations, project management, and industry trends. But if you're passionate about design and willing to work hard, there are absolutely opportunities to build a successful career. After Maria left, Sarah reflected on how much had changed in her relationship with her mother. The woman who had once dismissed her career aspirations was now actively supporting other young people who were facing similar family resistance. Patricia had not only learned to accept her daughter's success, but had become an advocate for non-traditional career paths, at least within certain limits. She still valued financial security and professional respectability, but she had expanded her definition of what those concepts could include. The transformation wasn't complete or perfect. Patricia still occasionally made comments that revealed her preference for traditional professional hierarchies, and she sometimes struggled to explain Sarah's work to friends who shared her old perspectives. But the fundamental respect was there, built on the foundation of Sarah's demonstrated success and her willingness to help her family when they needed it most.
Sarah's business continued to grow, eventually expanding to include a team of 8 employees and a client roster that included several Fortune 500 companies. She moved to a larger office space, bought a bigger house, and even started a scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in design and digital marketing. The scholarship fund was particularly meaningful because it specifically targeted students whose families were skeptical of creative career paths. Sarah wanted to provide both financial support and mentorship for young people who were facing the same challenges she had encountered. When the local newspaper wrote an article about the scholarship fund, Patricia made copies and distributed them to everyone she knew. She kept one framed copy on her desk and another on the refrigerator, displaying them with the same pride she had once reserved for David's professional certifications. The article mentioned Sarah's successful design consultancy and her role in helping local businesses improve their marketing and branding. It described her as a community leader and entrepreneur who was giving back to support the next generation of creative professionals. Patricia called Sarah after the article was published, her voice filled with unmistakable pride. "Everyone at the country club is talking about the article," she said. "Mrs. Henderson asked if you might be able to help her son's restaurant with their advertising materials." Sarah laughed, remembering all the times Patricia had seemed embarrassed to discuss her daughter's work with those same country club friends. Now, her mother was actively promoting her business and basking in the reflected glory of Sarah's professional recognition. The relationship between Sarah and her mother had come full circle. The daughter who had been dismissed and discouraged had not only proved her skeptics wrong, but had eventually become the family's source of both financial stability and professional pride. Looking back, Sarah could see that her mother's initial resistance had actually strengthened her determination to succeed. The years of having to prove herself had taught her resilience, self-reliance, and the importance of believing in her own abilities even when others didn't. The story had become one that Patricia now told with pride rather than embarrassment. Her daughter, the successful entrepreneur, the business owner who had built something from nothing, the creative professional who had found a way to turn artistic talent into financial security. For Sarah, the vindication was sweet, but complex. She was grateful for her mother's eventual recognition and support, but she also understood that her own sense of worth could not depend on external validation, even from family members. The most important lesson had been learning to trust her own judgment and pursue her goals regardless of whether others understood or approved. The business continued to thrive, the family relationships healed and strengthened, and Sarah built a life that was both professionally fulfilling and personally satisfying. She had proved that success could come from following passion rather than convention, and that sometimes the best revenge was simply living well. As she sat in her office one morning reviewing proposals for 3 new client projects, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this point.
The scared college student who had defied her mother's expectations had become a confident entrepreneur who employed others and served clients across the country. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Patricia, calling to let her know about another potential client referral. "Sarah, darling," her mother said, the warmth in her voice still surprising, even after all this time. "I hope you have time in your schedule. I've been bragging about you again, and now everyone wants to hire you." Sarah laughed, accepting both the referral and the implicit apology that came with her mother's enthusiastic support. Some stories, she reflected, really do have happy endings, even if they take longer than expected to arrive. The call that would change everything came on a Tuesday morning in March, just as Sarah was reviewing quarterly reports that showed her company's most profitable period yet. The voice on the other end belonged to Marcus Rivera, the CEO of Tech Vision Industries, a Fortune 500 company based in Seattle that specialized in consumer electronics and software development. "Ms. Chen, I've been following your work through some mutual connections in the industry," Marcus began, his tone professional but warm. "We're looking at a complete rebranding of our consumer division, and frankly, we're not impressed with what the big agencies have presented so far. Your portfolio shows exactly the kind of fresh thinking we need." Sarah set down her coffee and gave Marcus her full attention. Tech Vision was exactly the kind of client she had been hoping to attract, a company large enough to provide substantial revenue, but innovative enough to value creative solutions over safe, conventional approaches. "I'd be very interested in discussing your needs," Sarah replied, already mentally calculating how such a project might impact her team's capacity and her company's growth trajectory. "We'd need to move quickly," Marcus continued. "Could you put together a preliminary presentation and fly out to Seattle next week? I'd like you to present to our executive team." Sarah's mind raced through the logistics. A project of this magnitude would require expanding her team, possibly relocating temporarily, and managing the most complex client relationship of her career. It was exactly the kind of challenge she had been preparing for, but it was also a significant risk. "I can absolutely do that," she said, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "Send me the project brief and I'll have a presentation ready for next week." After hanging up, Sarah sat quietly in her office processing the magnitude of the opportunity. Landing Tech Vision as a client would establish her company as a major player in corporate design, opening doors to other large accounts, and positioning her as a serious competitor to the established agencies that had previously dominated this market segment. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah worked 18-hour days developing concepts, researching Tech Vision's market position, and crafting a presentation that would demonstrate both her creative vision and her understanding of their business needs. She barely slept, surviving on coffee and the adrenaline that came from pursuing a goal she had been working toward for years. Her team rallied around the project, with everyone contributing ideas and feedback as Sarah refined her approach. Linda Martinez, her lead designer, worked alongside Sarah to develop visual concepts that balance innovation with mass market appeal. James Park, her newest hire and a recent graduate from the same program Sarah had completed years earlier, contributed fresh perspectives on social media integration and digital marketing strategies. The flight to Seattle felt surreal. As Sarah reviewed her notes one final time, she reflected on how far she had come from the college student who had funded her education with coffee shop wages and student loans. Now she was flying first class to present to the executive team of a billion-dollar corporation, representing a company she had built from nothing. The Tech Vision headquarters was a gleaming complex of glass and steel that embodied the cutting-edge technology the company was known for. Sarah was escorted to a conference room on the 40th floor, where floor-to-ceiling windows provided a stunning view of the Seattle skyline and Puget Sound beyond. The executive team consisted of 8 people, including Marcus Rivera, the chief marketing officer, the head of product development, and several other senior managers. Sarah had encountered skepticism before when presenting to groups that weren't sure what to expect from a relatively small design firm, but this group seemed genuinely interested in her perspective.
Her presentation lasted 90 minutes and covered everything from brand positioning to packaging design, digital marketing strategies, and long-term brand evolution. She had prepared for dozens of potential questions and had researched Tech Vision's competitors, market challenges, and growth opportunities. The response was overwhelmingly positive. The marketing team was particularly impressed with Sarah's understanding of their target demographic, and the product development team appreciated her suggestions for how design elements could enhance the user experience of the actual devices. "This is exactly what we've been looking for," said Jennifer Walsh, the chief marketing officer. "The big agencies keep presenting us with variations on what everyone else is doing. You're showing us something that feels both fresh and authentic to our brand values." Marcus Rivera nodded in agreement. "The question now is capacity. This is a massive undertaking, and we need to know that you can scale up to handle it without compromising quality." Sarah had anticipated this concern and had prepared a detailed plan for expanding her team and managing the project timeline. She explained how she would hire additional designers and project managers, establish a dedicated tech vision team, and implement quality control processes to ensure consistent output across all deliverables. "I understand this represents a significant leap in scale for my company," Sarah acknowledged, "but I've been building toward exactly this kind of opportunity. My team is ready, my processes are proven, and my commitment to excellence is absolute." The meeting concluded with handshakes and promises to follow up within 48 hours. As Sarah flew back to Phoenix, she allowed herself to feel cautiously optimistic. The presentation had gone better than she had dared to hope, and the executive team's response suggested that they were seriously considering her proposal. The call came the next morning. Tech Vision wanted to move forward with Sarah's company, pending the negotiation of contract terms and project timelines. The initial contract would be worth $1.2 million over 18 months, with the potential for additional work if the product launch was successful. Sarah's hands trembled as she hung up the phone. She had just secured the largest contract in her company's history, a project that would transform her business and establish her reputation at a national level. The girl whose mother had dismissed her career as playing with computers was about to work with one of the most innovative technology companies in the world. The first person she called was Patricia. Despite years of complicated history, her mother had become one of Sarah's most enthusiastic supporters, and Sarah wanted to share her excitement with someone who would understand the magnitude of this achievement. $1.2 million? Patricia repeated, her voice filled with amazement. "Sarah, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you." The conversation that followed was unlike any Sarah had ever had with her mother. Patricia asked detailed questions about the project, the client, and what this would mean for Sarah's company's future. Her interest was genuine and informed, a far cry from the dismissive responses that had characterized their discussions about Sarah's career for so many years. "I have to admit," Patricia said toward the end of their conversation, "when you first told me you wanted to study design, I thought you were making a terrible mistake. I was so worried about your future, about whether you'd be able to support yourself. I never imagined that your artistic talents could lead to something like this." Sarah appreciated her mother's honesty and the acknowledgement of how much her perspective had changed. "It wasn't easy," Sarah replied. "There were plenty of times when I wondered if you were right, especially during those early years when I was struggling to establish myself, but I'm glad I trusted my instincts." The next several months were the most challenging and rewarding of Sarah's professional life. She expanded her team from 8 to 23 employees, leased additional office space, and implemented new systems for project management and quality control. The Tech Vision project required her to coordinate with teams across multiple time zones, manage complex approval processes, and maintain her company's creative standards while meeting aggressive deadlines. Linda Martinez proved invaluable during this period, taking on increased responsibilities as Sarah's deputy and managing many of the day-to-day operations while Sarah focused on client relationships and strategic decisions. James Park emerged as a talented project coordinator, demonstrating an ability to balance multiple priorities while maintaining attention to detail. The work itself was exactly the kind of creative challenge Sarah had always dreamed of tackling.
TechVision's smart home devices required packaging that would appeal both to tech enthusiasts and mainstream consumers, marketing materials that would communicate complex features in accessible language, and branding that would distinguish their products in an increasingly crowded marketplace. Sarah found herself working more closely with TechVision's engineering and product development teams than she had initially expected, providing input on user interface design, product aesthetics, and even some functionality features. Her suggestions were taken seriously and often implemented, giving her a sense of involvement in the product development process that went beyond traditional graphic design work. The demanding schedule took a toll on Sarah's personal life. She was working 70-hour weeks regularly, traveling to Seattle twice a month for client meetings, and managing a team that was handling multiple high-pressure projects simultaneously. Her social life virtually disappeared, and she found herself missing family gatherings and personal commitments more often than she was comfortable with. The stress reached a breaking point during a particularly difficult week in August. A miscommunication between Sarah's team and TechVision's engineering department had resulted in packaging designs that didn't accommodate late-stage product modifications, requiring extensive revisions on an already tight timeline. Sarah was in her office at 11 o'clock on a Friday night, working through the technical specifications that would determine how the new packaging should be configured, when her phone rang. The caller was Patricia, and her mother's voice immediately conveyed concern. "Sarah, I know you're busy, but I haven't heard from you in 2 weeks, and Michael said you missed his birthday dinner last weekend. Are you taking care of yourself?" The question, asked with genuine maternal concern, broke through the wall of professional determination that Sarah had been maintaining for months. She found herself crying for the first time since landing the TechVision contract, overwhelmed by exhaustion and the pressure of trying to manage everything perfectly. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice betrayed her emotional state. "Just dealing with some project complications. It's nothing I can't handle." Patricia wasn't convinced. "Sarah, success is wonderful, but not if it destroys your health and your relationships. Maybe you need to think about whether this project is worth what it's costing you."
The irony of receiving this advice from the woman who had once pressured her to prioritize career success above all else was not lost on Sarah. Patricia had evolved from someone who measured worth primarily through professional achievement to someone who understood that success needed to be balanced with personal well-being. "I can't just walk away from this," Sarah explained. "This is the biggest opportunity my company has ever had. If we succeed, it will change everything for us. And if you collapse from exhaustion or make mistakes because you're overworked, what happens then?" Patricia asked gently. "Sarah, you've already proved everything you need to prove. You don't have to sacrifice your entire life for one project." The conversation prompted Sarah to reassess her approach to managing the TechVision contract. She realized her determination to handle everything personally was actually putting the project at risk, as well as undermining the confidence of team members who were perfectly capable of taking on additional responsibilities. Over the following weeks, Sarah began delegating more effectively and establishing better boundaries around her work schedule. She promoted Linda Martinez to Associate Creative Director, giving her authority to make decisions on certain aspects of the project without requiring Sarah's direct approval. She also hired 2 additional project managers to handle client communications and timeline coordination. The changes improved both the quality of the work and Sarah's personal well-being. The team responded positively to having more autonomy and responsibility, and the project timeline actually accelerated as tasks were distributed more efficiently among specialists. TechVision's executive team noticed the improvement in project management and communication quality. Marcus Rivera commented during one of their regular check-in calls that Sarah's company seemed to have found an ideal balance between creative innovation and professional efficiency. "We've worked with a lot of agencies over the years," he told Sarah, "and most of them either sacrifice creativity for reliability or vice versa. You've managed to deliver both, which is exactly what we were hoping for when we decided to work with you." The product launch was scheduled for November, time to take advantage of holiday shopping season demand for smart home technology. As the launch date approached, Sarah's team worked around the clock to finalize all marketing materials, ensure packaging was ready for mass production, and coordinate with TechVision's sales and distribution teams.
3 weeks before the launch, Marcus Rivera called with news that would either validate all of Sarah's hard work or expose weaknesses in her company's execution. TechVision's retail partners, including major electronics chains and online platforms, had reviewed the marketing materials and packaging designs and were reporting unprecedented interest in the new product line. Our buyers are telling us that this is some of the most compelling product presentation they've seen in the smart home category, Marcus explained. Pre-orders are already exceeding our most optimistic projections, and our retail partners are requesting larger initial inventory commitments. The success of the pre-launch phase generated additional opportunities for Sarah's company. TechVision asked her to develop point-of-sale materials for retail locations, digital advertising campaigns for social media platforms, and even experiential marketing concepts for trade shows and product demonstrations. Each new request represented additional revenue and expanded Sarah's company's role in TechVision's overall marketing strategy. What had begun as a straightforward rebranding project had evolved into a comprehensive creative partnership that positioned Sarah's firm as TechVision's primary creative resource. The product launch itself exceeded everyone's expectations. TechVision's smart home devices became the best-selling products in their category during the holiday shopping season, with particularly strong performance in demographics that had previously been difficult for the company to reach. The packaging designs that Sarah's team had created were widely praised by industry publications and design blogs. Several major retailers featured TechVision's products in prominent store displays, specifically citing the packaging design as a factor that helped the products stand out from competitors. More importantly for Sarah's business, the success of the TechVision launch attracted attention from other major companies looking for creative agencies that could deliver both creative innovation and professional project management. Within 2 months of the product launch, Sarah's company received inquiries from 6 other Fortune 500 companies interested in discussing potential projects. The financial impact was transformative. The TechVision contract alone generated more revenue than Sarah's company had earned in its first 4 years combined. The additional projects that resulted from the exposure pushed her annual revenue above $2 million, establishing her company as one of the fastest-growing design firms in the Southwest. She celebrated the milestone by moving her company to a larger office space in downtown Phoenix, a modern building that could accommodate her growing team while providing the kind of professional environment that would impress clients like TechVision. She also established a profit-sharing program for her employees, recognizing that the company's success had been built on their collective efforts and dedication. The success brought new challenges as well as new opportunities. Managing a team of 35 employees required different skills than managing 8, and Sarah found herself spending more time on administrative tasks and strategic planning than on hands-on creative work. She missed the direct involvement in design projects that had originally drawn her to the field, but she recognized that her role had evolved into something more complex and ultimately more impactful. Patricia had become one of Sarah's most astute observers of these changes. During one of their regular lunch meetings, her mother noted that Sarah seemed to be struggling with the transition from working designer to business executive. "You built this company because you loved the creative work, but success has pulled you away from the thing you're most passionate about. How do you feel about that?" The question was insightful and touched on something Sarah had been grappling with for months. She had achieved everything she once had dreamed of in terms of business success, but the day-to-day experience of running a large company was often less satisfying than the early years when she had been directly involved in every project. "I'm proud of what we've built," Sarah replied carefully, "but you're right that my role has changed dramatically. Sometimes I wonder if I'm still a designer or if I've become something else entirely." Patricia smiled knowingly. "Your father went through something similar when his practice grew. He missed the direct patient care that had drawn him to dentistry, but he had to learn that leadership and mentorship were different forms of the same calling." The comparison to her father's experience was illuminating. David had eventually found ways to stay connected to the clinical work he loved, while still managing the business aspects of his practice effectively. Perhaps Sarah could find a similar balance between strategic leadership and creative involvement. Over the following months, Sarah restructured her role to include regular hands-on participation in major creative projects, while delegating more of the administrative and business development responsibilities to other team members. She promoted Linda Martinez to creative director with full authority over project management and client relationships for smaller accounts, while retaining personal involvement in projects above a certain size and complexity threshold. The adjustment proved beneficial for both Sarah and her company. Her renewed engagement in creative work brought fresh energy and perspective to major projects, while Linda's expanded role provided valuable experience and positioned her as Sarah's potential successor for future growth. The success of the restructured approach was evident in the company's next major project, a comprehensive branding initiative for a startup pharmaceutical company that was preparing to launch a revolutionary new treatment for diabetes. The project combined Sarah's strategic thinking and creative vision with Linda's project management expertise and the specialized skills of team members who had developed expertise in healthcare marketing regulations and scientific communication. The pharmaceutical project introduced Sarah to an entirely new industry with unique challenges and requirements. Healthcare marketing required adherence to strict regulatory guidelines while still communicating complex medical information in ways that patients and healthcare providers could understand and act on.
Sarah threw herself into learning about pharmaceutical marketing with the same intensity she had brought to mastering graphic design software years earlier. She studied FDA regulations, consulted with medical communications specialists, and even attended medical conferences to better understand how healthcare professionals evaluated and adopted new treatments. The depth of her preparation impressed the pharmaceutical company's executives, who had worked with agencies that treated healthcare projects as merely another creative challenge rather than a specialized discipline requiring domain expertise. Dr. Rachel Martinez, the startup's chief medical officer, became a particularly valuable collaborator and eventually a close friend. Rachel had spent 15 years in clinical research before joining the startup, and she appreciated Sarah's commitment to understanding the medical and scientific aspects of their product, rather than simply focusing on marketing aesthetics. Most agencies want to make everything look sleek and modern without understanding that healthcare providers need different information presented in different ways than consumer products, Rachel explained during one of their project meetings. You're taking the time to understand not just what we want to communicate, but how our audience actually processes and uses medical information. The pharmaceutical project's success led to additional healthcare clients, establishing Sarah's company as a specialist in medical and scientific communications. This specialization proved to be highly profitable, as healthcare companies were willing to pay premium rates for agencies that demonstrated genuine expertise in their industry's unique requirements. The diversification into healthcare marketing also provided Sarah with a sense of purpose that went beyond commercial success. The treatments and devices her team helped bring to market had the potential to improve or save lives, adding a dimension of social impact to her work that she found deeply meaningful. Patricia was particularly proud of this aspect of Sarah's business evolution. "I always wanted you to have a career that made a difference in the world," she told Sarah during one of their conversations. "I thought that meant becoming a doctor or a lawyer, but I can see now that what you're doing is just as important in its own way." The acknowledgement represented a complete reversal from Patricia's earlier dismissal of creative careers as frivolous or impractical. She now understood that Sarah's work contributed to meaningful outcomes in ways that Patricia had never anticipated or understood when her daughter first chose to study design. Sarah's company continued to grow, eventually reaching 50 employees and establishing satellite offices in Denver and Austin to better serve clients across the western United States. The expansion required Sarah to develop skills in areas she had never expected to encounter when she first started freelancing from her apartment years earlier. She learned about commercial real estate, employee benefits administration, multi-state tax compliance, and a dozen other aspects of running a substantial business. Each new challenge required research, consultation with specialists, and often trial and error experimentation to find approaches that worked for her company's particular needs and culture. The learning curve was steep,
but exhilarating. Sarah discovered that she enjoyed the strategic aspects of business development and operations management almost as much as she enjoyed creative work. The skills were different but complementary, requiring analytical thinking, problem-solving abilities, and attention to detail that translated well from design work. More importantly, the business growth provided opportunities for Sarah to mentor young designers who were facing the same kinds of challenges and skepticism she had encountered earlier in her career. She established an internship program that specifically targeted students from non-traditional backgrounds or those whose families were skeptical of creative careers. The mentorship work became one of Sarah's most rewarding activities. She would meet regularly with interns and junior employees, sharing not just technical skills and industry knowledge, but also strategies for building confidence, managing client relationships, and navigating the business aspects of creative careers. Many of these conversations reminded Sarah of her own early struggles with family expectations and self-doubt. She tried to provide the kind of encouragement and practical advice that she wished had been available to her when she was starting out. Jessica Torres, one of her most promising interns, came from a family background remarkably similar to Sarah's own. Jessica's parents had immigrated from Mexico and built a successful restaurant business, but they viewed art and design as luxuries rather than viable career paths. "They keep asking when I'm going to get serious about my future," Jessica confided to Sarah during one of their mentorship sessions. "They want me to study business or accounting, something that will guarantee a stable income." Sarah shared her own story of family skepticism and eventual acceptance, emphasizing that Jessica's parents' concerns came from love and worry rather than a desire to limit her potential. The key is to prove them wrong through success rather than through argument. Build your skills, establish a track record, and show them that creative careers can provide the financial security they want for you. Jessica took Sarah's advice to heart, working diligently to develop both her creative abilities and her understanding of the business aspects of design work. By the end of her internship, she had impressed several of Sarah's clients with her professionalism and creative problem-solving abilities. When Jessica graduated from college, Sarah offered her a full-time position with a starting salary that was substantially higher than what most new graduates could expect in traditional fields. Jessica's parents, who had initially been skeptical of her career choice, were amazed by the opportunity their daughter had earned through her dedication and talent. The success of interns like Jessica reinforced Sarah's belief that creative careers could provide both personal fulfillment and financial security for people who are willing to develop their skills professionally. It also reminded her of how much her own perspective had evolved since the early days when she had focused primarily on proving her mother wrong. Now, instead of being motivated primarily by the desire to vindicate her career choice, Sarah was driven by the opportunity to create meaningful work, build a successful business, and help others achieve their own professional goals. The shift from defensive validation to positive impact represented a maturity that had taken years to develop. Patricia noticed this change in her daughter's perspective and commented on it during one of their regular conversations. "You seem more relaxed about your success than you used to be, less like you're trying to prove something, and more like you're simply enjoying what you've built." The observation was accurate. Sarah had reached a point where her professional accomplishments spoke for themselves, and she no longer felt the need to justify her career choice to anyone, including herself. The confidence that came from sustained success had replaced the defensive determination that had driven her through the early years of her career. This newfound confidence allowed Sarah to take on even more ambitious projects and make strategic decisions based on long-term vision rather than short-term validation. When approached by a major automotive company about developing a comprehensive brand identity for their new electric vehicle division, Sarah's decision to accept the project was based on its potential to advance her company's capabilities and impact rather than on any desire to prove her credibility in a new industry. The automotive project required Sarah to expand her team's expertise into areas like environmental marketing, regulatory communications for emerging technologies, and consumer education about complex technical innovations. The learning curve was substantial, but Sarah's company had developed systems and processes that made it possible to quickly acquire specialized knowledge and apply it effectively to client challenges. The project's success led to recognition from industry publications and design organizations that had paid little attention to Sarah's work previously. Her company received several national design awards and was featured in case studies about successful creative agencies serving Fortune 500 clients. The recognition was gratifying but no longer surprising. Sarah had come to expect excellence from her team and had built systems that consistently delivered high-quality results. The external validation was pleasant, but secondary to the internal satisfaction that came from knowing they were doing their best work. Patricia framed some of the award certificates and articles about Sarah's company, displaying them prominently in her home office alongside David's dental certifications and other family achievements. The visual representation of her pride in Sarah's accomplishments was a powerful symbol of how much their relationship had changed over the years. "I used to worry that you were making a mistake," Patricia admitted during one of their conversations about the latest award. "Now I worry that you're working too hard to fully enjoy everything you've achieved." The concern was valid. Sarah's company had grown beyond her wildest early expectations, but the demands of managing a 50-person business with national clients required constant attention and energy.
The question of work-life balance became more pressing as Sarah approached her 35th birthday and began thinking seriously about personal goals that had been deferred while she focused on building her career. She wanted to travel more, develop hobbies outside of work, and perhaps eventually start a family of her own. The challenge was figuring out how to step back from the day-to-day operations of her company without compromising the quality and client relationships that had made its growth possible. Sarah had built her business around personal relationships and direct involvement in major projects, making it difficult to delegate without potentially losing some of the competitive advantages that distinguished her company from larger agencies. Linda Martinez, now creative director and Sarah's most trusted collaborator, had proven capable of managing increasingly complex projects independently. Several other team members had also demonstrated leadership potential and could potentially take on expanded responsibilities if given the opportunity. Sarah began planning a gradual transition that would allow her to maintain strategic oversight while reducing her involvement in day-to-day operations. The process would require careful timing, clear communication with clients, and probably at least 2 years of deliberate preparation to ensure continuity of service and quality. The planning process itself was energizing, representing the next stage of Sarah's evolution from hands-on designer to strategic business leader. She was creating something that could eventually operate successfully without her constant involvement, which would be the ultimate validation of everything she had built over the previous decade. As she worked on these transition plans, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The scared college student who had defied her mother's expectations had become a successful entrepreneur who employed dozens of people and served clients across multiple industries. More importantly, she had proven that success could come from following passion rather than convention, and that creative careers could provide both personal fulfillment and financial security for people who were willing to work hard and think strategically about their goals. The relationship with Patricia had evolved from conflict to mutual respect and genuine affection. Her mother had not only accepted Sarah's career choice, but had become one of her most enthusiastic supporters and advocates. The transformation had taken years and had required both women to challenge their assumptions about success, family expectations, and the value of different types of work. But the result was a relationship that was stronger and more authentic than it had been when Sarah was trying to meet expectations that didn't align with her talents and interests. As Sarah looked toward the future, she felt confident that whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead, she had built a foundation of professional success, personal relationships, and self-knowledge that would serve her well. The girl whose career had been dismissed as impractical had created something remarkable, and she was just getting started. The phone call that would define the pinnacle of Sarah's career came on a rainy Thursday evening in October. She was at home, reviewing financial projections for the next quarter, when Marcus Rivera's name appeared on her phone screen. It had been 6 months since the successful Tech Vision product launch, and their ongoing relationship had evolved into a partnership that went beyond traditional client-agency dynamics.
Sarah, I need to discuss something with you that's completely confidential, Marcus began, his voice carrying an urgency she had never heard before. Can you fly to Seattle tomorrow? I'm talking about something that could change both of our companies forever. The cryptic nature of the request intrigued Sarah immediately. Marcus had never been one for dramatic overstatement, and his tone suggested this was far more significant than another product launch or marketing campaign. Of course, Sarah replied, already mentally rearranging her schedule. What should I prepare for? Just bring your best strategic thinking, Marcus said. And Sarah, this conversation never happened until tomorrow afternoon. The flight to Seattle gave Sarah time to speculate about what Marcus might have in mind. TechVision had been performing exceptionally well since their smart home device launch, with market share growing consistently and new product development accelerating. Perhaps they were considering an acquisition, or planning to go public, or launching into an entirely new market segment. When Sarah arrived at TechVision's headquarters, she was escorted not to the usual conference room, but to Marcus's private office on the executive floor. The space was elegantly appointed with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, awards and industry recognitions displayed on custom shelving, and a small seating area that suggested intimate business discussions rather than formal presentations. Marcus was waiting with Jennifer Walsh, TechVision's chief marketing officer, and two people Sarah didn't recognize. The first was an older woman with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes, introduced as Catherine Mitchell, TechVision's board chair and largest individual shareholder. The second was a younger man in an expensive suit who was identified as David Kim, a senior partner at Goldman Sachs. Sarah, thank you for coming on such short notice, Marcus began once everyone was seated. What I'm about to share with you is being discussed with only a handful of people, and it will remain confidential regardless of your decision about participation. The gravity of his tone made Sarah sit forward attentively. TechVision is being acquired by Meridian Corporation, Marcus continued, in a deal worth $3.8 billion. The acquisition will close in 4 months, assuming regulatory approval and shareholder acceptance. Sarah knew Meridian by reputation. They were a diversified technology conglomerate with interests in everything from aerospace to consumer electronics, known for acquiring innovative smaller companies and integrating them into their broader ecosystem. Congratulations, Sarah said, though she sensed this news was leading somewhere more complex than a simple announcement. Catherine Mitchell leaned forward. Sarah, we've been incredibly impressed with your company's work for TechVision, not just from a creative standpoint, but from a strategic and operational perspective. Your team has functioned more like an internal marketing department than an external agency. Jennifer Walsh nodded in agreement. The integration has been seamless, your understanding of our market position is sophisticated, and frankly, your creative work has been a significant factor in our valuation increase over the past 18 months. David Kim opened a leather portfolio and removed several documents. Which brings us to our proposition. Meridian Corporation is looking to establish an internal creative and strategic marketing division rather than continuing to work with traditional agencies. They want to bring that capability in-house, but they want it to be led by someone who has proven they can deliver results at scale. The direction of the conversation was becoming clear, and Sarah felt her pulse quicken. They want to acquire your company, Marcus said directly, as part of the TechVision deal. You would become Senior Vice President of Creative Strategy for Meridian, leading a division that would serve not just TechVision, but all of Meridian's portfolio companies. Catherine Mitchell slid a document across the coffee table. The offer is outlined there, but the key points are these. Meridian would acquire your company for $15 million. You would receive a 5-year employment contract with a base salary of $500,000 plus substantial performance bonuses. And your current employees would be offered positions within the new division with salary increases of at least 20%. Sarah stared at the document without immediately opening it, processing the magnitude of what was being offered. $15 million for a company she had started with a few $1,000s in savings and a determination to prove her mother wrong. The base salary alone was more than her parents had ever earned combined in their best years. There's more, David Kim added. Meridian is committed to establishing this division as a center of excellence for creative strategy across multiple industries.
You would have a budget of over $50 million annually, authority to hire the best talent available, and direct access to Meridian's executive team for strategic planning. The scope of the opportunity was breathtaking. Instead of running a 50-person agency serving a handful of clients, Sarah would be leading a division that could employ hundreds of people and influence marketing strategies for some of the largest companies in multiple sectors. I need to understand the expectations, Sarah said, opening the document and scanning the key terms. What would success look like in this role? And what kind of autonomy would I have in building and operating the division? Marcus smiled, clearly pleased by her question. That's exactly the kind of thinking that convinced us you were the right person for this opportunity. You would have complete creative and operational control, with quarterly performance reviews based on metrics we would develop together. The goal is to create something unprecedented in corporate marketing capabilities. Catherine Mitchell added, Sarah, we're not looking for someone to manage an existing department. We're looking for someone to build something revolutionary that becomes a competitive advantage for Meridian across all of their business units. The conversation continued for 2 hours, covering everything from organizational structure to performance metrics, relocation requirements, and long-term career development opportunities. By the end, Sarah had a comprehensive understanding of what Meridian was offering and what they expected in return. The financial terms were extraordinary, but what excited Sarah most was the creative and professional challenge. She would be building something entirely new, with resources and support that most creative professionals could only dream of having access to. The opportunity to work across multiple industries, with cutting-edge technology companies and established market leaders, represented the ultimate validation of everything she had learned and achieved over the past decade. I need time to review this thoroughly and discuss it with my team, Sarah said as the meeting concluded. This affects not just me, but 50 people who have built their careers with my company. Of course, Marcus replied. Take as much time as you need, but we would like an answer within 2 weeks if possible. The acquisition timeline requires us to finalize all related agreements relatively quickly. The flight back to Phoenix felt surreal. Sarah spent the entire trip reviewing the acquisition documents and considering the implications for her company, her employees, and her own future. The offer was generous beyond anything she could have imagined, but it also represented a fundamental change in her role and identity. Instead of being an independent entrepreneur, she would become a corporate executive. Instead of building her own company culture, she would be integrating into Meridian's organizational structure. Instead of choosing her own clients and projects, she would be serving the strategic needs of Meridian's portfolio companies. The trade-offs were significant, but so were the opportunities. The resources available at Meridian would allow her to tackle projects and challenges that were simply beyond the scope of her current company. The financial security would be life-changing not just for her, but for every employee who chose to make the transition. Sarah's first call after landing was to Linda Martinez. As creative director and her closest collaborator, Linda's perspective would be crucial in making this decision. $15 million? Linda repeated when Sarah explained the offer. Sarah, that's incredible! But more importantly, what do you think about the role itself? Would you be happy working within a corporate structure after being independent for so long? The question went to the heart of Sarah's uncertainty. She had spent years building a company culture that prioritized creativity, employee development, and work-life balance. Meridian was known for excellence and innovation, but it was also a large corporation with established hierarchies and processes. I think the creative opportunities would be unprecedented, Sarah replied, but you're right that the cultural fit is a big unknown. I would need strong assurances about autonomy and the ability to maintain our team's working style and values. Linda was quiet for a moment before responding. What does your gut tell you? Not about the money or the prestige, but about whether this feels like the right next step for you personally. It was exactly the right question. Sarah had learned to trust her instincts about major career decisions, and those instincts were telling her that this opportunity, despite its uncertainties, represented the natural evolution of everything she had been building toward. It feels right, Sarah admitted,
Scary, but right. Like, this is what all the previous work has been preparing me for. The next step was discussing the opportunity with her broader team. Sarah called an all-hands meeting for the following morning, knowing that transparency and inclusion in the decision-making process would be crucial for maintaining team morale and trust. The conference room had never felt more charged with anticipation as Sarah explained the acquisition offer and its implications for every employee. She presented the financial terms, the role expectations, and the timeline for making a decision. "I want everyone to understand," Sarah said, addressing her team directly, "that this decision affects all of us equally. If we move forward, it will mean significant changes in how we work, who we work for, and where some of us might be located. If we don't move forward, we continue building what we've started here, which has been incredibly successful and rewarding." The questions that followed revealed both excitement and concern among team members. Younger employees were enthusiastic about the opportunities for career growth and the substantial salary increases. More experienced team members were worried about losing the entrepreneurial culture and close-knit relationships that had made their current work environment so satisfying. James Park, who had grown from junior designer to project director over the past 3 years, raised a particularly thoughtful question. "Sarah, what happens to our current clients who aren't part of Meridian? Would we be able to maintain those relationships, or would we be exclusively focused on Meridian's portfolio companies?" The question highlighted one of Sarah's own concerns about the acquisition. Her company had built strong relationships with clients across multiple industries, many of whom relied on their expertise and trusted their strategic guidance. Abandoning those relationships would be both professionally and personally difficult.
"That's something I would need to negotiate as part of the final agreement," Sarah replied. "I think there could be ways to structure the transition that allows us to honor existing commitments while taking on the new responsibilities." The team meeting lasted 3 hours and covered everything from career development opportunities to relocation logistics, family considerations, and long-term professional goals. By the end, Sarah had a clear understanding of her team's perspectives and concerns, which would inform her negotiations with Meridian. That evening, Sarah drove to her parents' house for dinner, something that had become a monthly tradition since their relationship had improved. She hadn't planned to discuss the acquisition offer, but the magnitude of the decision made it impossible to focus on casual conversation. Patricia immediately sensed that something significant was on her daughter's mind. "Sarah, you seem distracted tonight. Is everything all right with the business?" Sarah decided to share the opportunity with her parents, knowing that their perspectives would be valuable, even though the final decision was ultimately hers alone. David's reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. $15 million? Sarah, that's extraordinary. You've built something truly valuable. Patricia's response was more measured but equally supportive. "The money is impressive, but what matters more is whether this opportunity aligns with your long-term goals and values. What does your instinct tell you about working for a large corporation after being independent?" The question echoed Linda's earlier inquiry, and Sarah gave the same answer. "It feels like the right next step, even though it's intimidating. The resources and opportunities at Meridian would allow me to work on projects that could have real impact across multiple industries." Patricia nodded thoughtfully. "You've never shied away from challenges before, and you've consistently succeeded when others doubted you could. If this feels right to you, then I trust your judgment completely." The conversation continued over dinner, with David asking detailed questions about Meridian's business model and Patricia inquiring about the implications for Sarah's employees and work-life balance. Their engagement and support reinforced Sarah's confidence in her decision-making process. The following week was intensive, involving detailed negotiations with Meridian's legal team, extensive due diligence on both sides, and careful planning for how the acquisition and transition would be managed. Sarah worked with employment lawyers to ensure her team members' interests were protected, and she insisted on contract terms that would preserve as much operational autonomy as possible. The negotiations were complex, but productive. Meridian demonstrated genuine commitment to maintaining the culture and working style that had made Sarah's company successful, while also providing the resources and support necessary for significant expansion. The final agreement included several key provisions that addressed Sarah's primary concerns. She would have complete authority over hiring, project selection, and operational procedures within her division.
Her current employees would receive not only salary increases, but also equity participation in Meridian's long-term performance. The company would maintain offices in Phoenix, Denver, and Austin, with additional locations possible as the division grew. Most importantly for Sarah personally, the contract included provisions for her to continue serving existing clients through a separate consulting arrangement, ensuring that those relationships could be maintained even as her primary focus shifted to Meridian's portfolio companies. When Sarah announced the final agreement to her team, the response was overwhelmingly positive. The financial benefits were substantial for everyone, but the professional opportunities were what generated the most excitement. Team members would have access to projects and resources that most creative professionals never encounter in their entire careers. Linda Martinez was promoted to Deputy Creative Director with responsibility for managing day-to-day operations, allowing Sarah to focus on strategic planning and new business development. James Park became Senior Project Director with authority over client relationships and project delivery. Several other team members received significant promotions and expanded responsibilities as the division prepared for rapid growth. The acquisition closed on schedule, with the announcement generating significant attention in both technology and marketing industry publications. Sarah found herself profiled in major business magazines and invited to speak at conferences about entrepreneurship, creative leadership, and the evolution of marketing services within corporate environments. The media attention was gratifying, but also surreal. The woman whose career choice had once been dismissed by her own mother was now being recognized as an innovative business leader and strategic thinker. Industry publications described her as a pioneering example of how creative professionals could build substantial businesses and achieve executive-level success. Patricia collected every article and interview, displaying them prominently and sharing them with friends with obvious pride. The transformation from skepticism to championship was complete and genuine. "I've been thinking about something," Patricia said during one of their regular dinners shortly after the acquisition announcement. "Do you remember when you first told me you wanted to study graphic design?" Sarah nodded, recalling the tense conversations and her mother's obvious disappointment. "I was so worried about your future. All I could think about was financial security and social respectability. I couldn't see past my own assumptions about what success looked like." She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts carefully. "But you saw something I couldn't see. You understood that the economy was changing, that creative skills would become more valuable, that technology would create opportunities that didn't exist when I was making career decisions. You were right about everything, and I was wrong about almost everything." The admission was delivered without self-pity or defensiveness, simply as an acknowledgement of how much both women had learned and changed over the years. "I wasn't right about everything," Sarah replied gently. "I made plenty of mistakes along the way. But I was right about following my interests and developing skills that felt natural to me." Patricia smiled. "That's exactly what I should have encouraged you to do from the beginning. Trust yourself, work hard, and find ways to use your talents productively. Instead, I tried to push you towards someone else's definition of success." The conversation represented a moment of complete reconciliation between them. There was no remaining resentment or unresolved tension, only mutual respect and genuine affection between two women who had learned to appreciate each other's perspectives and experiences.
Sarah's first 6 months at Meridian exceeded even her optimistic expectations. The corporate environment provided resources and opportunities that allowed her to tackle projects of unprecedented scope and complexity. Her division grew from 50 to nearly 200 employees, with teams specializing in different industries and types of creative challenges. The work itself was endlessly engaging. One month she might be developing branding strategies for a new aerospace venture, the next creating marketing campaigns for consumer electronics, and the following month working on communication strategies for pharmaceutical launches. The variety kept her intellectually stimulated, while the resources allowed her to attract top talent and pursue innovative approaches to traditional marketing challenges. Meridian's executive team treated her as a strategic partner rather than a service provider, involving her in high-level business planning and seeking her input on acquisition targets and market development strategies. The respect and authority she had earned were evident in every interaction with senior leadership. The financial benefits were transformative, not just for Sarah, but for her entire extended family.
She paid off her parents' mortgage completely, established college funds for her nephews and nieces, and created a foundation focused on supporting young people from working-class families who wanted to pursue creative careers. The foundation became one of Sarah's most personally meaningful projects. Working with high school guidance counselors and community college programs, she identified students who showed artistic talent but lacked family support or financial resources to pursue creative education. The foundation provided scholarships, mentorship, and internship opportunities designed to help these students build sustainable creative careers. Many of the scholarship recipients reminded Sarah of her younger self, struggling to balance family expectations with personal passions. She took particular satisfaction in helping them navigate the same challenges she had faced, providing the encouragement and practical support that she had wished for during her own early career development. The mentorship aspect of the foundation work allowed Sarah to share not just financial resources, but also the strategic thinking and business skills that had been crucial to her own success. She taught scholarship recipients about client relations, project management, financial planning, and the importance of treating creative work as a professional discipline rather than just artistic expression. Several foundation scholarship recipients eventually joined Sarah's division at Meridian as interns and entry-level employees, creating a pipeline of talent that understood both the creative and business aspects of their work. The program became a model that other companies began adapting for their own talent development needs. Patricia became actively involved in the foundation's work, using her social connections and organizational skills to help with fundraising and program development. Her enthusiasm for supporting young creative professionals represented a complete reversal from her earlier skepticism about artistic careers. "I understand now what I failed to see when you were starting out," Patricia told Sarah during one of their foundation planning meetings. "Creative careers require the same business skills and strategic thinking as any other profession. The difference is that success also requires talent and vision that can't be taught in traditional business programs." The insight was perceptive and reflected how much Patricia's understanding had evolved through observing Sarah's career development and success. 2 years into her role at Meridian, Sarah was approached about an opportunity that would represent the ultimate validation of her professional journey. The International Association of Marketing Professionals was looking for a keynote speaker for their annual conference, an event that drew thousands of marketing executives, creative directors, and business leaders from around the world. The invitation was significant not just because of the audience size, but because of what it represented. The association was the most prestigious organization in the marketing field, and their keynote speakers were typically CEOs of major corporations, celebrated academics, or legendary figures in advertising and marketing. Sarah's proposed topic was the evolution of creative leadership in corporate America, focusing on how creativity and business strategy had changed over the past decade. The presentation would allow her to share insights from her own journey while addressing broader trends in how companies approached marketing and brand development. Preparing for the keynote required Sarah to reflect systematically on her career progression and the lessons she had learned along the way. The process of organizing her thoughts and experiences into a coherent narrative helped her recognize patterns and insights that had previously been intuitive rather than explicit. The central theme that emerged was the importance of combining creative vision with business acumen, treating artistic talent as one component of a broader skill set rather than as something separate or opposed to commercial success. Sarah had succeeded not just because she was talented at design work, but because she had learned to understand client needs, manage projects effectively, build strong teams, and think strategically about market positioning and competitive advantage. The keynote presentation was scheduled for the conference's opening morning, with an audience of over 3,000 marketing professionals from 47 countries. As Sarah stood backstage waiting to be introduced, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The nervous college student who had defied her mother's career expectations had become a recognized thought leader in her field. someone whose insights and experiences were valuable enough to share with an international audience of senior executives and industry leaders. The presentation itself went exceptionally well. Sarah's combination of personal storytelling and strategic analysis resonated with an audience that included many people who had faced similar challenges in balancing creativity with business requirements. Her examples from specific client projects illustrated abstract concepts in ways that were immediately practical and applicable. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with extended applause and a standing ovation that continued for several minutes. During the question and answer session that followed, audience members shared their own experiences and sought advice about challenges they were facing in their organizations. One question came from a young woman who identified herself as a recent graduate, struggling to convince her family that a marketing career could provide financial stability and professional respect. Sarah's response drew directly from her own experience and the lessons she had learned about family expectations and career development. The key is to demonstrate success rather than argue about potential, Sarah advised. Build your skills professionally, exceed expectations in your early positions, and show through results that creative careers can provide everything your family wants for you in terms of security and achievement. The exchange reminded Sarah of her own early struggles and reinforced her commitment to supporting young professionals who were facing similar challenges. After the conference, Sarah was contacted by several major corporations interested in consulting services, and 3 different universities wanting her to consider executive in residence positions. The keynote had established her reputation beyond her immediate industry and created opportunities for additional professional development and impact. More personally meaningful were the messages from young marketing professionals who had attended the presentation or watched it online. Many shared stories of family skepticism about their career choices and thanked Sarah for providing a roadmap for overcoming those challenges while building successful careers. Patricia attended the keynote presentation via live stream, watching from her home office with a group of friends she had invited to witness her daughter's moment of professional recognition. The experience of seeing Sarah addressed as a thought leader and industry expert, speaking to thousands of executives from around the world, provided a powerful visual representation of how much both their lives had changed. I can't believe that's my daughter up there, Patricia told her friends during the presentation. 20 years ago, I was worried she was making a terrible mistake. Now she's teaching business executives from Fortune 500 companies how to be more successful. The pride in her voice was unmistakable and genuine, representing the complete transformation of her understanding of Sarah's career and potential. Following the keynote success, Sarah began receiving invitations to serve on corporate boards, participate in industry advisory committees, and contribute to business publications as a thought leader on creative strategy and leadership development. Each opportunity expanded her influence and provided new platforms for sharing insights about the intersection of creativity and business success. The board positions were particularly valuable for expanding Sarah's understanding of different industries and corporate governance practices. Serving on the boards of both established companies and innovative startups gave her exposure to a wide range of business challenges and strategic approaches. Her experience as both an entrepreneur and a corporate executive provided unique perspectives that other board members found valuable. She could understand both the operational challenges of building creative teams and the strategic requirements of integrating creative services into broader business objectives. The consulting work that grew out of her speaking and board activities allowed Sarah to work with companies across multiple industries, helping them develop creative capabilities and improve their approach to brand development and marketing strategy. The projects were intellectually stimulating and financially rewarding, while also expanding her network of professional relationships. 3 years after joining Meridian, her division had grown to 300 employees, and
The unit had become one of Meridian's most profitable divisions, with client satisfaction scores and retention rates that exceeded industry benchmarks across all metrics. The success led to additional responsibilities within Meridian's corporate structure. Sarah was promoted to executive vice president with authority over not just creative services, but also corporate communications, public relations, and strategic marketing for all portfolio companies. The expanded role included membership on Meridian's executive committee and direct involvement in corporate strategy development. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase and equity position that further enhanced Sarah's financial security. More importantly, it provided access to corporate decision-making at the highest levels and influence over strategic directions that affected thousands of employees and millions of customers. Sarah's success at Meridian had not gone unnoticed by executive recruiters and other major corporations. She received regular inquiries about CEO positions at mid-sized companies and senior executive roles at larger corporations. While most of these opportunities were financially attractive, none offered the combination of creative challenge, strategic influence, and cultural fit that made her current position so satisfying. The inquiries did, however, prompt Sarah to think more systematically about her long-term career goals and personal objectives. She was now financially secure beyond anything she had previously imagined possible, professionally recognized as a leader in her field, and personally satisfied with the impact she was having through both her corporate work and foundation activities. At 38, Sarah had achieved everything she had once thought would take a lifetime to accomplish. The question facing her was what to do with the next phase of her career and life. The answer began to crystallize during a conversation with Patricia about legacy and long-term impact. They were discussing the foundation's work when Patricia made an observation that prompted Sarah to think differently about her future possibilities. "You've proven everything you set out to prove," Patricia said. "You've built a successful business, achieved financial security, and gained recognition as a leader in your field. The question now is what you want to accomplish for other people." The comment resonated deeply with Sarah. Her focus had shifted over the years from proving her own worth to helping others achieve their potential, and she found that work more satisfying than any personal achievement. "I've been thinking about that," Sarah replied. "The foundation work has been incredibly rewarding, but I wonder if there are ways to have even greater impact on young people who are facing the same challenges I faced." Patricia nodded thoughtfully. "What would that look like? What would allow you to help the most people in the most meaningful way?" The question sparked an idea that had been developing in the back of Sarah's mind for months. What if she could create something that combined her business experience, her understanding of creative career development, and her passion for mentoring young professionals? Over the following weeks, Sarah began developing a concept for a new type of educational institution, something that would bridge the gap between traditional art schools and business programs. The idea was to create a curriculum that would teach creative skills alongside business development, client relations, project management, and entrepreneurship. The program would specifically target students from backgrounds similar to Sarah's own, young people with creative talent, but limited family support or understanding of how to build sustainable careers in creative fields. Instead of having to choose between artistic expression and financial security, students would learn to combine both in professionally viable ways. Sarah began researching existing educational models, consulting with academics and industry professionals, and developing detailed curricula for different specializations within creative business development. The project consumed her evenings and weekends, but the work felt more personally meaningful than any corporate project she had ever managed. The concept evolved into a proposal for a comprehensive program that would combine traditional design and creative training with business courses specifically tailored to creative professionals. Students would work on real client projects throughout their education, building portfolios and professional networks while earning their degrees. The program would also include extensive mentorship components,
with successful creative professionals serving as advisors and guides for students throughout their education and into their early careers. The goal was to ensure that graduates had both the skills and the support networks necessary to build sustainable creative businesses or advance within corporate creative departments. Sarah presented the concept to several university administrators and received enthusiastic responses. The interdisciplinary approach was exactly what many institutions had been looking for, and Sarah's track record and industry connections made her an ideal candidate to lead such a program. After extensive discussions and planning, Arizona State University agreed to partner with Sarah in developing a new creative business leadership program within their design school. Sarah would serve as the program's founding director, developing the curriculum and teaching key courses while maintaining her executive role at Meridian on a part-time basis. The announcement of the new program generated significant media attention and interest from prospective students. The combination of Sarah's reputation, ASU's established design program, and the innovative curriculum attracted applications from students across the country and internationally. Patricia was deeply involved in the program's development, helping with fundraising, curriculum planning, and student recruitment. Her enthusiasm for the project reflected her complete transformation from someone who had been skeptical of creative careers to someone who was actively working to expand opportunities for young creative professionals. "This is exactly what you should have had when you were starting out," Patricia told Sarah during one of their planning sessions. "A program that takes creative talent seriously while also teaching the business skills necessary for long-term success." The first cohort of creative business leadership students began classes in the fall, with Sarah teaching the capstone course on strategic creative leadership. The students came from diverse backgrounds, but shared common characteristics: artistic talent, entrepreneurial ambition, and often family skepticism about their career choices. Working with these students reminded Sarah of her own early struggles and reinforced her commitment to providing the support and guidance she had wished for during her own career development. The program's emphasis on practical application meant that students worked on real client projects from their first semester, building experience and confidence while developing their technical and business skills. The program's success exceeded everyone's expectations. Students were receiving internship and job offers from major corporations, starting their own successful businesses, and consistently outperforming graduates from traditional programs in terms of starting salaries and career advancement. More importantly for Sarah, the program was having the intended impact on students' families and communities. Parents who had initially been skeptical of their children's career choices were seeing tangible evidence of success and financial security. The program was changing perceptions about creative careers in the same way that Sarah's own success had changed her mother's understanding. 5 years after the program's launch, Sarah decided to transition from her corporate role at Meridian to focus full-time on education and mentorship. The decision was financially feasible because of her equity position in Meridian and the success of her various consulting and speaking activities. The transition allowed Sarah to expand the creative business leadership program to include graduate-level courses, executive education for working professionals, and international exchange opportunities. She also established partnerships with major corporations to provide internships, project opportunities, and recruitment pipelines for program graduates. Patricia, now in her 70s, remained actively involved in the program as a volunteer coordinator and fundraiser. Her social skills and business connections had proven invaluable for building relationships with corporate partners and community supporters. "I never imagined I would spend my retirement helping art students develop business plans," Patricia joked during one of their planning meetings. "But this is more rewarding than anything I did during my country club years." The comment reflected Patricia's own personal growth and evolution. The woman who had once defined herself primarily through her husband's professional status
had found meaningful purpose in supporting young people's career development and challenging traditional assumptions about creative professions. Sarah's foundation work had also expanded significantly, providing scholarships for hundreds of students and creating mentorship networks that connected established creative professionals with emerging talent.
The Foundation's alumni were starting to achieve significant success in their own careers, creating a multiplier effect that extended the Foundation's impact beyond its direct recipients. Looking back on her journey, Sarah could see clear threads connecting her early struggles with family expectations to her current role as an educator and advocate for creative careers. The challenges she had faced had taught her resilience, strategic thinking, and the importance of combining passion with practical skills. More importantly, those experiences had given her credibility and understanding that made her effective at helping others navigate similar challenges. She could speak from experience about overcoming family skepticism, building financial security through creative work, and achieving professional recognition in competitive business environments. The relationship with Patricia had become one of the most rewarding aspects of Sarah's life. The transformation from conflict and misunderstanding to mutual respect and shared purpose had been gradual but profound. They now worked together as partners in supporting young creative professionals, combining Patricia's social and organizational skills with Sarah's industry expertise and educational vision. During one of their regular dinners, Patricia reflected on how much their relationship had changed over the years. "I spent so many years trying to protect you from making what I thought were mistakes," she said. "I couldn't see that you were actually making exactly the right choices for your talents and interests. My fear of financial insecurity blinded me to the possibilities you could see." Sarah appreciated her mother's honesty and self-awareness. "You were trying to be a good parent according to the information and experiences you had. The economy and job market changed in ways that weren't predictable when I was choosing my career path." Patricia shook her head. "It wasn't just about economic changes. I was measuring success using other people's definitions instead of trying to understand what would make you happy and fulfilled. That was my failure as a parent." The acknowledgement was generous and reflected Patricia's genuine growth in understanding both her daughter and herself. Their relationship had become a model for how family members could learn to support each other's choices, even when those choices challenged their own assumptions and expectations. As Sarah approached her 45th birthday, she reflected on the journey that had taken her from a struggling college student to a recognized leader in creative education and business development. The path had been neither straight nor predictable, but each challenge and opportunity had contributed to her current understanding of what it meant to build a meaningful career. The financial success had been gratifying and had provided security and opportunities for her family and community. The professional recognition had validated her career choices and opened doors for additional impact and influence. But the most satisfying aspect of her journey had been the opportunity to help others avoid the isolation and self-doubt she had experienced during her own early career development. The Creative Business Leadership Program had graduated over 200 students, many of whom were already making significant contributions to their industries and communities. The foundation had provided scholarships and mentorship to nearly 1,000 young people, creating a network of creative professionals who understood both the artistic and business aspects of their work. Patricia's transformation had been equally remarkable. The woman who had once been embarrassed by her daughter's career choice had become an advocate for creative education and a mentor to young people pursuing non-traditional career paths. Her evolution demonstrated that people were capable of significant growth and change when presented with new information and different perspectives. The story that had begun with family conflict and career uncertainty had evolved into one of professional success, personal fulfillment, and intergenerational collaboration. Sarah had not only proven that creative careers could provide financial security and professional respect, but she had also created systems and programs to help others achieve similar success. Most importantly, she had transformed her relationship with her mother from one based on conflict and misunderstanding to one characterized by mutual respect, shared purpose, and genuine affection. The journey had taken years and had required both women to challenge their assumptions and expand their understanding of success and family relationships.
As Sarah looked toward the future, she felt confident that the foundation she had built, both professionally and personally, would continue to create positive impact for years to come. The program she had developed would continue serving students long after her direct involvement, and the relationship with Patricia would remain a source of strength and joy for both of them. The girl whose career had been mocked by her own mother had become a woman whose work was respected by industry leaders around the world. The family dynamics that had once been a source of pain and frustration had become a source of strength and purpose. The career that had been dismissed as impractical had provided not just financial success, but also the platform for helping hundreds of other young people achieve their own professional dreams. Sarah's story had become proof that success could come from following passion rather than convention, that family relationships could evolve and improve over time, and that the most meaningful achievements often involved helping others overcome the same challenges that had once seemed insurmountable. The foundation work would continue expanding, the Creative Business Leadership Program would keep graduating successful students, and Patricia would remain actively involved in supporting the next generation of creative professionals. The legacy they had built together would extend far beyond their own lives, creating opportunities and changing perceptions for decades to come. As Sarah sat in her office one evening, reviewing applications from prospective students and planning the curriculum for the program's upcoming expansion, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction and purpose. The journey from dismissed daughter to respected leader had been challenging but ultimately transformative, not just for her own life, but for everyone whose path she had been able to influence along the way. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Patricia, calling to discuss plans for the Foundation's annual scholarship gala. "Sarah, darling," her mother said, her voice warm with affection and pride, "I've been thinking about your keynote speech for the gala. What if we focused on the theme of transformation, how families and communities can evolve to support dreams they didn't initially understand?" Sarah smiled, recognizing the perfect symmetry in her mother's suggestion. Their own transformation had become the foundation for helping countless others navigate similar journeys of family understanding and career development. "That's perfect," Sarah replied. "It's exactly the message our scholarship recipients and their families need to hear." As they discussed the gala plans, Sarah reflected on how completely their roles had evolved. The mother who had once discouraged her creative ambition was now one of her closest collaborators in supporting other young people's creative dreams. The relationship that had once been a source of conflict had become a source of strength and purpose for both of them. The conversation continued for an hour, covering everything from event logistics to scholarship selection criteria, fundraising strategies, and long-term program development. It was the kind of collaborative planning session that would have been unimaginable during Sarah's college years, when discussions with her mother inevitably turned into arguments about career choices and life priorities. Now they worked together, combining their different skills and perspectives to create opportunities for young people who were facing the same challenges Sarah had encountered decades earlier. The transformation was complete and genuine, built on mutual respect, shared values, and a common commitment to making a positive difference in other people's lives. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.